Welcome to the CPO Rising podcast series brought to you by Products That Count, the world's largest nonprofit community, engaging over 500,000 product managers and chief product officers united by a mission to empower everyone to build products that truly count. In a world flooded with products, only a few ignite passion, deliver value at scale, and transform lives. Behind those exceptional products are visionary CPOs and high-performing product teams. We recognize these trailblazers through our coveted awards, accelerate careers from PM to the C-suite and beyond through daily best practices, and serve as the trusted advisor to nearly all Fortune 1000 CPOs. Our corporate alliance includes Walmart, Ford, Cisco, Johnson & Johnson, Amplitude, and more. The most admired product leaders across industries serve on our advisory council, guiding the future of product leadership. Together, we're shaping a future where every product counts. Learn more at productsthatcount.org. Produced in partnership with Capgemini and Mighty Capital, this series brings you exclusive conversations between our resident CPO, Renee Niemi, and the 2025 CPO Award winners. Get ready for raw insights, real strategies, and the secrets behind their success. Let's get into it.
Hi, today I have with me Jeetu Patel. He is the Executive Vice President and Chief Product Officer at Cisco. Jeetu, first of all, I want to start by saying congratulations on being one of our top Chief Product Officers this year.
I'm so honored. Thank you, Renee, and thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, super excited to get to know about you and your journey. Why don't we just dive in and start by a quick introduction? Tell us a little bit about what Cisco does, although I think a lot of us know, but tell us what you're doing over at Cisco and maybe a bit about your journey to Chief Product Officer.
Sure. So, Cisco is we just celebrated our 40th birthday
Wow.
this year, and we are a infrastructure company. We do everything from networking, which is our lion's share of our business, um, uh, and also security and observability. And we just acquired a $28 billion acquisition with Splunk. So we are a data company, and then we've got a great business in WebEx and contact center. So we've got a very broad portfolio of things that we do around infrastructure to help out hyperscalers, to help service providers, as well as to help enterprises of any shape and size, from the smallest companies to the largest of the largest companies. And so, about 55 billion or so in revenue. Um, and it's a privilege to be here. And I'm very fortunate in the sense that I'm the first chief product officer that they've named in the history of the company, which was should be encouraging for the people in the product community that you support. And I feel like it's one of the things that ends up happening when you go to a company as large as Cisco is oftentimes you can start to see silos getting created with different business units. And what can be a huge strength, which is the breadth of the portfolio, can actually end up becoming a liability because the portfolio is starting to get siloed and not fully integrated. And so we realized that, our CEO, Chuck, realized that a while ago, and we decided to pull all product under one umbrella. Everything from networking to security to observability to Splunk to collaboration, contact center, all of the businesses, hardware, software, services. When I say services, I mean the SaaS services.
Yeah.
It's been an amazing set of results that the team has been able to accomplish within a very short amount of time, because they were, there's Conway's law if you ship your org chart. And so the moment you actually take out the friction in the org, people just are able to go out and execute in a far better way. And we were able to do that. So it's exciting.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. And congrats for for paving the way. Has to be just, a massive undertaking to kind of plot it all out, to figure out how all the integration points are when you start to think about customer delivery and all of those components. Definitely want to understand that a little bit better. Before we dive into that, I would love your perspective. You've been in product for a long, long time. You're working for an infrastructure company that especially tends to bend more CTO versus CPO. I'd love your take on how the role has really morphed, especially over your tenure at Cisco, but maybe even before that.
Yeah, and when I first joined Cisco for the first 4 years or so, I ran the security business and I ran the WebEx business. Both hardware and software on both of the businesses.
Yeah.
And each one of those businesses were relatively, sizable in their scale. So roughly about 4 billion, 4.5 billion each, respectively, between the security and collab. And then we acquired Splunk, and then we became the largest kind of security company in the world when you actually could think about the Splunk revenue with the security revenue. And so what's important, I think, and regardless, at some point in time, I actually feel like scale is not hard. It's the absence of scale that gets to be hard.
Mm-hmm.
Scale allows you a lot of optionality on things that you can do. But the thing that you have to keep in mind is, you have to have you can't lose the founder mentality in my mind. And one of the things I tend to do is I will focus a lot on the core guiding principles that I keep in mind. And we need to make sure that we operate with as a playbook. And then it should become part of the fabric of the culture. And we at the company level have 3 core guiding principles, which is think really big, play to win, and drive durable growth. And in the product side, we take that and we take it down to the next level, which is what do we want to really do in product? Well, number one, we want to make sure that we build products that people love, that they can talk to their friends and family about. Why is that important? Because if you're building products for hundreds of millions of people, billions of people, it is virtually impossible to have an ad on a billboard on 101 be the way that you actually spread the word. The only way that you can get that many people motivated to coming to you is you have to have your customers and your users love your product so much, regardless of whether it's infrastructure or if it's an application. And we actually play across every layer of the stack, all the way from the silicon to the application that we might deliver. You have to make sure that customers love your product and they can't resist talking to someone else about it. And when you do that, magic starts to happen. And, the way I think about this is that first thing you have to do is make sure that it's irresponsible for the customer to ignore your product. And so that's the first core kind of guiding principle is build great products that get meaningfully adopted, that get to commercial relevance fast. That's the 3-part kind of, I call it a framework, but that's how we ought to think about it.
Yeah.
So that's the first core value, right? The second core value is you got to operate with an ecosystem mindset where you can't have a zero-sum game where everything has to be from you. We exist in an ecosystem of other companies, some of them who are competitors, who your customers might have invested in. And it's our job to make sure that the customers get value from the combination of that investment with the investment they've made in you, that you owe it to the customer to make sure that those things work well together, even if sometimes they compete with you. And so the notion of taking a stance of partnering with your largest competitors is a very important kind of core principle that we have, which is counterintuitive in some way because like, oh, we need to compete. I think that zero-sum kind of thinking should just be completely gone in today's day and age. So that's the second core principle. And the third one then is no one really wins in the market by being 10% better than the one next door. You only win by being at least an order of magnitude better. Going back to this kind of notion of like, you have to make it irresponsible for the customer to ignore you. And so that rule of 10x is one that we take very very seriously, which is what is the asymmetry that we can create in the market as a result of perspectives that only Cisco can bring to the table, that no one else can, because of the things that we could actually bring, because of the experiences that we have. And underneath all those three, a common substrate is quality is priority zero. Things should just work, because when they don't, you start talking about quality, and you should always measure the time you talk about quality with your customers, because every moment you talk about quality is wasted time that you can't talk about the true innovation, but you haven't earned the right to talk about true innovation until you fix quality first. So that's kind of the overall framework that I think about.
Yeah.
And so far, it's we're seeing a lot of momentum and tempo in the business at this size and scale. I mean, we've got 90,000 employees, 27,000 people in my organization, and there's a tremendous level of momentum that you're seeing. And the way we think about this is operate like the world's largest startup, work at speed with scale.
At speed with scale. Well, there's just so much in there in terms of the frameworks. I have to imagine that kind of underlying all of this is a culture that, as a product manager, you either fit or don't fit. And I have to also imagine that not just in product, but the supporting functions to product enables this success that you speak of, which is really inspiring. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of culture is at Cisco and how that works to enable kind of these big pillars of success?
Yeah, I mean, look, Cisco is a very compassionate company. It's a very thoughtful company. It's a very inclusive company in the way that we operate. And those are amazing traits that Cisco has. Cisco also does a few things that we had to change. For example, people weren't as comfortable with conditions of conflict and debate. And I think conflict is a necessary condition of business. And if you don't actually engage in a debate, you just don't grow, you don't push the envelope. And so we have to make sure that that's actually a pretty important dimension. The other important kind of cultural aspect is a lot of times in product organizations specifically, what ends up happening is we all start to fool ourselves into thinking that, hey, the problem isn't on my end, it's actually on the other side. I'm building the product, but those salespeople, man, they don't know how to sell the product. Or the marketing team doesn't know how to go market the product, or the customer success team doesn't know how to adopt the product. And the way I try to tell my team is it is always a product issue. And you have to have the mindset, because bad products and bad decisions in products so often in our industry get cast as go-to-market problems.
Mm-hmm.
Where you're like, well, I built a great product, but the salespeople didn't know how to sell it. Well, one of my mentors used to tell me, he's like, Jeetu, imagine you actually built a drug to cure cancer, and you sold the drug on top of the Himalayas every third Tuesday afternoon from 2:30 to 4:30 p.m. Do you think you're going to need to have a very fine-tuned SEO engine to go drive traffic to that? No, because you would have a line out the door, because the word of mouth would spread. And so I think it's very important that you assume primary responsibility for everything that goes wrong, and you deflect the credit for everything that goes right to the ecosystem around you of all the other functions, because it's there are two things that can happen. If your product's not working well, the common human instinct is to blame someone else. And when the product is working well, the common human instinct is to take credit for it. And I think we have to operate in exactly the opposite fashion. When the product's not working well, you have to say, what is it that we could be doing to create intrinsic pull in the product, in the market? The product needs to have pull. It should not be pushed into the market. It should be pulled. And then the second thing is, what do you need to do to make sure that when the product is working well, you recognize that it's not just the product and the engineering and the design and the analytics team working on building a product, but it's also the sales team and the marketing team and the customer success team, and even the accounting team and the order management team and the supply chain team. And all of those people come together to build this great cohesive experience for the customer to make something work like magic. And it's not just one of us doing it. And the moment you shed that arrogance, a lot happens. But you have to speak the truth, and you have to make sure that you don't get too engaged with being nice to each other at the expense of being truthful. And that culture shift is every human by instinct doesn't want to pick a fight. They want to be liked. And so you have to make sure that the primary goal is to build an amazing product that customers love, that can get in the hands of hundreds of millions of people at scale. And that requires a degree of, allegiance to the best decision for the customer to build the best product, and not to avoiding a fight or not to avoiding a debate. You have to make sure that you have the debate so that you can get to that end point.
Yeah. There's so many amazing nuggets in there. I want to stick with this notion of a challenge culture, and you could call it picking a fight, but it's also you could use other words, I think, but tell me if I'm wrong. It's defending, passionate defense of a topic so that you can get to the right answer. And a lot of people think about that as it's not personal, right?
It's never personal.
You guys are trying to solve, really, really big, interesting problems for very important, infrastructure for businesses to run efficiently. So it's really, fascinating to think about that. When I kind of encapsulate everything that you said, what really comes to mind is that growth mindset, and being open to the debate. Because I don't know how you feel, but sometimes I feel that if people are worried about the debate, are they worried that they're wrong?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's actually, the thing I found is the quality of problem that you choose to pick to solve in your life, or the quality of problems that you choose to pick to solve, actually are directly proportionate to the success of the outcome. And it's a very counterintuitive concept. What it means, at the heart of the problem, the higher the likelihood of success.
Mm-hmm.
Which doesn't make any sense, because why would that be the case? It's a really hard problem. It's because the best people get attracted to really hard problems. So pick the high level of density of problem, and you will actually attract the best people to go help solve the problem for you. That's number one. Your point on this notion of, the word fight is the wrong word. You are actually absolutely correct. What it is seeking the truth, without trying to go muddy that quest for truth, be clouded by trying to make people happy at the expense of seeking the truth. The false agreeability is the beginning of the end of a company, right? And I think as companies get larger, they get into this kind of, you start with every company that exists today that's a successful company used to be a startup. People forget that, right? And then that ethos somehow gets lost. And what is the beauty about a startup? The beauty about a startup is the asymmetry between the customer and you is very little, because the CEO is in front of the customer, understanding what the problem is, and then going back and building something that solves that problem. Then the company gets large, and what do? They get really good at the math of the business. What's the gross margin? Everyone knows it. What's the operating margin? Everyone knows it. What's my budget? Everyone knows it. What they forget, though, is that at times, companies, when they get large, can get disconnected from the soul of the business. And the soul of the business is, what is the core value that you're delivering to the market? And that is essentially the product. Now, I actually think it's actually mildly unethical to take mediocre product and get it pumped through a massive distribution channel, because you don't need yet another mediocre product in the market. So you have to make sure that you sweat the details. And the product's always in only one or two states. It's either incomplete or obsolete. You have to be constantly slightly dissatisfied, keep getting it better, and fight obsolescence. And that, I think, requires you to be in founder mode. And I think the origination of energy in a company starts from product, right? Because you are the one who is going to envision solving a problem. You're the one who's going to galvanize the team to build the product. And then you're going to have a ripple effect, because every decision you make will have a ripple effect on every other function in the business. So you better be careful in what you're doing. And you can't get too wedded to the solution that you've built. You have to get wedded to the importance of the problem that you're trying to go solve. And if you do that right, and make sure that you surround people around who are where you operate by influence, not by ownership, and you actually have a core foundation where you surround people who you trust, so that conflict, which is a necessary condition of business, actually gets practiced. And I mean conflict of ideas, not conflict
Yeah,
of
yeah,
personality.
exactly.
And you get some really magical things that start to happen. And I've seen this now in multiple different companies, that most people want to come into the office or want to go into work wanting to do a good job. Like, most people don't not want to do a good job, but they generally lack clarity on what needs to happen. And that clarity requires clarity of thinking, then clarity of communication, a level of rigor in operational execution, and then inspiration required so that everyone can follow you. And those are all aspects that are really needed for a product leader.
Yeah. Wow. I love this notion of founder mode, especially when you're operating at scale. Is there any secret? Because I could see a scenario when you're building out an organization with the founder mode, almost like as a cultural or a way of working. But but sometimes when you get to scale, you get this, for lack of better words, complacency that founders never have. Like, how do you keep complacency from taking over?
The thing I find is, if you've what is the characteristic of the kind of people that you want to hire?
Yeah.
I think three of the most important traits in my mind are hunger, curiosity, and clarity of thinking.
Yeah.
Clarity of thought. And then, of course, you need to make sure that is the baseline that's required is in high integrity. Because like one of my mentors used to tell me, "Hey, Jeetu, it's one thing if you've got a person that's not that bright, that has low integrity, or when the person is really smart, has low integrity, that's like bad news. So make sure that you have that." But the first three are really important, because you can't teach hunger.
Right.
Someone either is hungry or they're not. And you can't teach innate level of curiosity where people just want to keep learning, and they're also curious about figuring out a way to unlearn, because it's just as important to unlearn as it is to learn. And one of the ways that we have found on our side that we do this, by the way, it's not like we've cracked the code. There's always going to be people that might not feel that way, or might have actually gotten. I always tell people it's okay to be skeptical. It's not okay to be cynical. When you find yourself being cynical for too long, chances are you've come to the end of the road, because very few people do really well by constantly being cynical about the place they work at. Like, you have to have almost an unrealistic dash of optimism that you got to keep telling yourself about, because business is hard. This is not like a up and to the right smooth ride. Like, it's usually always a bumpy road, and there's grit that's required, and persistence, and there's a level of grind in business that every business goes through. And Cisco is no different on that front. Like, you take a step back, and then the next day something goes wrong, and you feel like you've taken two steps backwards when you've taken a step forward. So you have to make sure that You have the stamina mentally to be able to do that. And I feel like we are, when collectively people lose that motivation, it is generally a leadership issue,
Yep.
not an individual issue. But I also don't believe in always asking every individual saying, what can we be doing for you? Every person has to ask, what can they be doing for the company? And the framework I use on that front is start by thinking about the company first, your team second, and you yourself third. Because the moment that gets flipped and you start thinking about yourself first, you actually do yourself a lot of harm because you've not progressed the company at the expense of yourself, and it gets to be very visible. So start by what's right for the company, and the good things will happen to you, because if you consistently keep executing, the company is not stupid. They're not doing it because they're good people. They're going to do it because they will find value in rewarding you, because that way you can continue to keep doing more of that. And that's only going to be good for the company.
Yeah, wonderful advice, especially for, leaders that are early in their journey. How do you hire with all of this as a context? Because to me, this doesn't feel like your everyday PM. So do you have any secret sauce in hiring?
I tend to orient, like, I feel like there's a lot of areas where experience is important and you got to have experience. Like, for example, I don't want to go into a brain surgery with a doctor that's never done a brain surgery before. Bad idea. But in a lot of areas, experience can actually be a massive liability. And I actually feel like getting people slightly uncomfortable in areas where they might have not completely done the job, but they're going to figure it out and bring a fresh perspective, super additive to the mission of the company to do that. And you always need to make sure that, people are people who are innate problem solvers, that are curious, that are hungry, that are articulate, that actually have the right level of clarity of thought, that can then effectively, therefore, be able to communicate effectively to a large group of people and inspire them to follow them, that do things for the right ethical reasons. Are we need to find those people,
Yeah.
right? And one of my coaches, he was my first boss, and he is still my coach. He had told me one time, my biggest lesson I learned from him when I first came to the Valley was that extremely smart people, for exactly the right ethical reasons, make really logical decisions that end up killing companies every single day. And why is that? It's because a lot of times incrementally logical decisions can sometimes make you fail to see the larger picture. And so you have to make sure that you broaden your aperture, and you have to make sure you seek the truth, and you have to make sure that you don't, every startup that's getting created while we are all enjoying scale, that startup is an irrational idea. Because if it was a rational idea, someone would have created that startup. Someone would have already done it. So it's an irrational idea. So it's so easy to dismiss that idea and say, you know what, this is no good. But constantly being paranoid and actually not thinking, I'm going to want to not have that startup succeed. But in fact, how can you figure out a way to partner with that startup so that you work in an ecosystem and bring to the table what you can bring, and then have that startup also succeed, and that benefits you and therefore benefits the ecosystem, therefore benefits your customers, therefore benefits society, is a really important kind of dimension to keep in mind. And so I've always found that, how you hire is get people that are hungry, that are curious, that are clear thinkers, that have high integrity, and always worry about people that self-profess that they're very high integrity, because usually you don't have to say it. Your actions should speak it,
Yeah. So how do you test for that? Like when you're actually in the process, is it through referrals? Like, how do you test for that?
I think references that someone provides you are almost useless. I actually think back channel references are the best. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is how much people pay attention to their personal reputation on the word that they give you matters a lot,
Mm.
because eventually all we have at the end is my word to you, Renee, that if
Yep.
I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to come through. And it's extremely important when you think about how a business operates, because a business is a web of interconnected, it's an organism with interconnection of multiple different nodes. And in order for me to come through on my end, someone else has to come through on their end. And in order for someone else to come through on their end, I have to come through on my end. And that requires that I can trust your word, that if you say you're going to do something by a certain time, in a certain quality, with a certain level of rigor and attention to detail, that in fact, I can trust you that you're going to do it and that you're going to come through on your side so I can come through on my side.
Yep.
Um, and when that happens, it's a really, really important, dimension that we have to keep in mind. So I always look to hire people who believe in teams and don't start getting falsely into the narrative that, okay, I did everything. Like I always tell people, like I am 99% lucky, 1% capable, because a lot of smart people before me that were just as hardworking would probably have not been availed the opportunity that I was availed. And that actually has a lot to do with being at the right place at the right time. Now, you have to take advantage of that opportunity, but you have to make sure that you are humble enough to know that there is a lot of luck in why you have gotten to where you've gotten to, and that you have availability of a platform, and that platform is not something that everyone has availed to them. And so you better take advantage of that platform, but you also be humble enough to know that you were fortunate enough to have that platform. So don't squander that opportunity, especially after you received it, when so many people who would have loved to receive it, even on your worst day, didn't get it.
Yeah. Super helpful. And I want to stay with this notion, and you're going to probably be curious as to why this was the one thing I picked up. But you've mentioned several times in our chat that you have coaches and coaches you've kept through your career journey. I um, I I really appreciate that, especially coming from somebody so accomplished with so many, so clearly you've set, a very high bar for yourself and your teams, and yet you still have coaches. Tell me a little bit about how that works into your personal framework and like maybe advice for other people who are aspiring to get to your level.
Yeah, I think about it. Michael Jordan had a coach. Who the hell am I? Right? Like
It's a
Michael Jordan had
great
mastered the game.
analogy. Yep.
So, um, and the way that I think about it is I have probably a set of what we call a personal board of directors. Marcus Buckingham had taught me this term. You have to have a personal board of directors. And in fact, I had talked about it even to the Wall Street Journal one time, and they had written an article. And I have probably like about a dozen personal board of directors. These are people that are first and foremost interested in making sure that I am successful. Um, they have no conflict of interest with me being successful. They have no jealousy towards me being successful. They have no reason to sugarcoat things to me. They will tell me the truth. They know I value the truth. They are capable of assessing when I actually need to be boosted up in confidence, and they're capable of assessing when I need to be brought down because I'm flying too high.
Mm.
And just let me know, this is what you're doing well, and this is what you're not doing well. And here's how, in the things that you're not doing well, you should do things differently. And here's how you should focus on your strengths and double down on them so that you can become world class at the things that you're doing well, because you are capable of doing that, and I believe in you. And I think that body of people I owe a lot to, and I continue to keep finding them on an ongoing basis. My quest for finding new mentors in life never ends, because you simply can't have too many of them, and what they do is most people, if you ask them, hey, help me out, most people want to help people out. You just have to make sure that you're open-minded to taking that help. And if you are, like, truly amazing things start to happen, because the way in which someone might approach a problem, frame a problem, and tackle a problem is very different from the way that I might have chosen to do that. And if I just did things without getting to someone else, then it doesn't work. And I also try to spend a fair amount of time with the early in career people, and finding a few people that I will actually coach from time to time. Unfortunately, the time is a limit, and so you can't do that too much, but you do it a certain amount of time. But I think finding time for getting coached and coaching other people are both great learning opportunities, because when you're coaching someone else, it allows you to articulate your thoughts in a way that actually also help you out.
Yep.
And, like, I'm learning from you in this exchange, even though I'm doing a lot of the talking, because of the questions you're asking and what you're making me think about. And that is triggering ideas in myself on what I could be doing differently. And that's actually a very important thing. So I think it's very important for people to find these coaches and find these mentors, and don't find them in your organizational chain of command all the time, because what you'll do is you will actually dilute the need for that. Because what you'll do is you'll say, oh, I'm going to go find someone who's like, I hate it when people come to me and they'll be like, Jeetu, will you mentor me? In the first meeting, they're like, well, I'm going to be up for a promotion. Can you actually support me for the promotion? I'm like, no, because that actually violates the whole purpose of mentorship, which is, I want to make sure that you're successful, but not by going out and handing something to you in a platter,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, anybody who has the opportunity to be mentored by you should definitely take full advantage of it and not abuse it, for sure. I have found this such an instructful conversation. It went in a completely different direction than I had intended. I had all sorts of like, oh, what's the implication of AI? But
We
it's
should talk
very,
about that for a few minutes if you have the time.
yeah, I have the time. Do you have the time?
Yes, yes. I have another 10 minutes. So if you want to talk about it, that'd be great.
Yes. Well, then let's just spend a second, which is just really a hard shift. Like AI is likely to change the entire world, how we work,
Yep.
how we develop products, and ultimately will find its way in a meaningful way in our products. I would just love your view, your vision of where we are in the journey of AI and where we're going in the journey of AI.
I think, I think of us as in the very early days of AI and moving at a pace that is unprecedented, that as something that we've never seen before. And I think if you think about, multiple phases of AI, the first phase, of course, AI was there in a very solid form, and we have been investing in it for like 5 or 6 years now, very heavily. But the seminal moment, of course, that everyone knows about is when ChatGPT was launched. And what it did was it gave such a clear use case for the benefits of AI that everyone could relate to, that it instantly got, kind of a pull effect that was needed, right? And so this notion of a language model that could understand human language, that could then answer questions back based on prediction of the next word, was this very fascinating thing. But we are now getting to the phase where I think in 2025 you will see artificial general intelligence start to show up in different parts of society and in different solutions that are out there, where the cognitive capability of a machine will meet those of humans in a lot of dimensions. And then I think super intelligence, which is when the cognitive capability exceeds that of a human, won't be too far out. But none of these are fantasies at this point. These are all kind of, inevitable to happen. It's just a matter of time. And I would say that the agentic side of AI is extremely important, because this notion of an agent being able to autonomously conduct a task or a job is something that is not um, is going to be profoundly important in 2025 and beyond, right? Um, so then you ask yourself the question and say, okay, so given that these are the big things that are happening, what are the changes that are going to be consequential? And I'll give a Cisco lens on this thing, because Cisco essentially provides the infrastructure to power AI from a connectivity standpoint. We also think about safety and security very dearly. So one of the things that we do is provide AI for safety and security. And then the third thing that we do is provide applications for it. But let's take a step back on AI and just say, if you were to see what's happened, just transpired in the past few months, what is happening in the market? And I think of these as a couple major seismic shifts that have occurred just in the past few months. Right? First one is what I call the DeepSeek effect. And the DeepSeek effect is models being actually finding techniques like mixture of experts or like chain of thought reasoning, where the model can be trained now at a much lower price point than what it could be in the past. As a result, what are the consequences of that? One, the cost of compute could go down. Two, there's going to be many, many models. And three, when you have not just tens of models, but tens of thousands of models, you will also see that there's going to be a common risk and exposure to society, that security and safety will be pretty important, because these models can be jailbroken. And given the fact that the models by definition are non-deterministic and unpredictable, and most companies are trying to build applications that are predictable on top of an unpredictable infrastructure, you have to make sure that you have a common substrate of safety and security and guardrails that can be applied across all models, all clouds, all agents, all applications consistently. And we feel like that is actually going to be a very, kind of important, kind of sequence of events that'll happen. Is as these agents talk to each other, how do they get authorized? What language are they talking to each other in? Will humans be able to intercept that language or not? These are all kind of important constructs that'll have to be thought through. The second thing is connectivity will be really important, because models are going to be AI is going to be very latency bound, and they're going to be very bandwidth hungry.
Yeah.
As agents talk to each other to do the second big effect. The first one is a DeepSeek effect. The second big effect I see is the operator effect, where you can literally tell an autonomous agent to do everything. And now these agents aren't needing APIs to talk to one another. The language that humans use to talk to a machine, which is the user interface, agents can now use that same user interface to talk to each other. So that in my mind changes the dynamics quite a bit. And a whole new set of architectures will need to evolve for the infrastructure. A whole new set of patterns of work will need to evolve for how we engage with the models. Business models will need to change. And the use cases, we are still thinking about this very reductively right now. It's like, oh, is this going to take human jobs? The way I think about this is I don't worry as much about AI taking my job as much as I worry about someone using AI well that takes my job. Because I still have the benefit of instinct and judgment and gut feel that we haven't been able to train the models on yet. But what I do know is that someone uses AI to complement that, rather than me not using AI, I'm going to be at a disadvantage. And so you're going to have to make sure that you accommodate to this new world. And each one of us will have to rethink how we do our jobs, and what our job will be in the future might be very different from the way it is today.
Wow, what a comprehensive look. I can see why you're in the role that you're in, because it's like, you're really, really great at taking like these big concepts and bringing them down to an individual impact level. It's a real gift. I just want to reemphasize, because I loved where you landed on from an individual impact. And we talk about this a lot at Products Account when I interview chief product officers, that especially product is a mix of art and science, and anything that is science predictable, AI can accelerate and or replace over time. That art is tougher, and when you put them together, it even gets harder. And so I love, just to quickly summarize, the advice is go figure out AI and make darn sure that not somebody else is replacing you using AI, that you replace yourself using AI, and then really take that extra time and energy to tune that art, right? And
It's a very good point you bring up, Renee, because what ends up happening oftentimes is people intrinsically sometimes, and for good reason, might fear change. And whenever you have a platform shift like this, which is going to refactor all of society, it never pays to fight the megatrend. Always use it as a tailwind.
yeah.
And if you can use it as a tailwind, you'll propel forward and you will actually be able to continuously stay ahead. And you will find the benefits of staying ahead to be so profound than actually being a late follower.
Yeah, that is a perfect summary. I love it. All right. Well, we've come to the end. I just have a couple of really quick, fun
Sure.
questions to ask you.
Yeah.
Are you ready? All right. What makes a great product leader?
Someone who has a large vision, attention to detail, and deep empathy for who they're building the product for, with an obsession for solving a problem without which they feel like their life would be incomplete if they didn't solve that problem eloquently enough.
Love it. Love it. All right. Next question is, what is your favorite tool right now?
I'd say the AI tools, whether it be ChatGPT, Anthropic, all of these are meaningfully additive. I'll tell you this: I would have not been able to take this job on and do well at the job if it weren't for AI, because I had to learn massive markets that I knew nothing about within a very compressed amount of time. And there's no way you could have done that if you didn't have companions in AI with you, because I
Wow.
just read and read every night for 2.5 to 3 hours. I would just learn by reading, and ChatGPT and Anthropic and Grok and all of these different tools, Gemini, I would just use all of them and then, form a perspective and then pressure test the perspective with people. And so it was a combination of AI and people. I'd have humans in the loop with me, but I would actually come and, get all the details from the AI engine. And then that allowed me to form a set of hypotheses very quickly.
Amazing. Amazing. All right. My last question for you, and this can be either personal or for work. Do you have a favorite question that you like to ask your favorite agent?
Oh, favorite agent. Yes, it's largely research that I do. It's actually the same question I ask in every interview that I actually spend a lot of time on. And I learned this from one of the people at Facebook. But the question I ask is, teach me something that I know nothing about that you know a lot about. And a variation of that question is what I also ask in AI, because every single time I'm talking to someone and they say something that I don't understand fully, I write it down, and that evening I will actually research that and learn a lot about that topic area.
I love it. And so it's just a really great period to put at the end of this conversation, because it's called growth mindset, and you definitely embody that thirst for knowledge and your ability to actually use it to a great cause is amazing.
Renee,
Jeetu,
you're doing a really noble job for training in the vocation of product management. I think it's one of the most important kind of skills for someone to learn in a company. And product is the soul of the company. And the fact that you're actually training people, because it's not something that's taught very well at schools. And so you're doing a very noble thing. And thank you for doing it in a not-for-profit. Thank you for doing it by getting such a large community of people. So I think you're doing a fantastic job.
Wow, that is very generous of you, and thank you for saying all those kind words. Definitely passion project for myself and on the entire team at Products That Count. But you've been very generous with your thoughts, with your advice, with your time, and I want to thank you and congrats again for being one of the best CPOs this year.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored.
This is ST Moadi again, founder and chair of Products That Count. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you like what you heard, be sure to leave us a review on your favorite platform, including Spotify and Apple. And please check out our other resources at productsthatcount.org. They're designed to accelerate your product career and make product the most important function in business. Until soon.